You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, today's our holiday show, and the last of the year until January. But I must say we have a special treat for you. The Morgan Library in New York City, unfortunately no relation of mine, the Morgan Library here is having a unique exhibition which is open now and stays open until February 16th, entitled She Who Wrote, Enheduanna and the Women of Mesopotamia, circa 3400 to 2000 BCE. Now, Sumerian literature is the earliest known human literature, and the Sumerian language is the oldest language for which writing even exists. Enheduanna is the first named Sumerian writer, and thus the first writer known by name in human history. She also read and wrote Akkadian, and she was called the Shakespeare of her time by subsequent scholars. Her petitionary prayers influenced, literature. Influenced the Psalms of the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Solomon, the epics of Homer, the Christian hymns, and experts have also noted that the Sumerian gods seemed more compassionate and more embracing of all people after Enheduanna than before her ministrations. So we are going to devote the entire program today to a celebratory example, an examination and reading of her work, or what remains of it, and her background. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. Enheduanna was unknown to modernity until 1927. When the archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated objects that bear her name and even her image. We know now that her name in Sumerian means ornament of heaven. And as the high priestess, we're not going to say priestess throughout all of this, we're going to say high priest, of the moon deity, Nana Suen, she composed 42 temple hymns and 3 standalone poems that, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is not credited to a named author, scholars consider Gilgamesh an important part of Mesopotamia's literary legacy. Well, in conjunction with her status as a religious figure and as a high priest, Enheduanna wielded considerable political power because she was the daughter of Sargon the Great, a figure credited by many, if not most, historians as the founder of the world's first empire. In particular, she played an essential role helping to bind together the northern Mesopotamian region of Akkad, where Sargon first rose to power, before he went on to capture the Sumerian city-states in the south. She did so by melding the beliefs and rituals associated with the Sumerian goddess Inanna with those of the Akkadian goddess Ishtar, and by emphasizing those links in her literary and religious hymns and poems, thereby creating a common system of beliefs throughout the empire. Each of the hymns Enheduanna wrote for 42 temples in the southern half of Mesopotamia highlighted the unique character of the patron goddess to the worshippers in those cities, in other words, making it relevant to them. Good organizing tactics. The hymns were then copied by scribes in the temples for hundreds of years after her death. Her writings are on display on clay tablets bearing the wedge-shaped imprints known as cuneiform. In this excerpt, for example, from her poem, The Exaltation of Inanna, she describes the creative process. Quote, "I have given birth, O exalted Lady Goddess, to this song for you. That which I recited to you at midnight, may the singer repeat to you at noon." And she lays claim to her authorship at the conclusion of the temple hymns. She's no shy, shrinking violet. She writes, "The compiler of the tablet is Enheduanna, and that which has been created here no one has created before." Which was true. Her grasp of mathematics, by the way, is perhaps not so surprising if you remember that historians trace the origins of math to Mesopotamia, right alongside the development of cuneiform and other early writing systems. Both writing and counting probably were developed by necessity in Mesopotamia's active agricultural and textile economy, where the systems became intertwined as farmers and merchants counted what was produced and recorded what was being sold and traded. Going beyond traditional roles at home or taking on religious duties, women took on more roles in a wide variety of trades, or, we don't know for sure, perhaps had always had them, including ceramics, weaving, baking, animal husbandry, brewing, and artisan work. One image on display in the exhibit captures a group of women at the loom weaving, with one figure in full motion, hair flying behind her. Another shows women at what looks like a pottery wheel. In others, women sit and dine with men, apparently as complete equals. They are also seen playing musical instruments, in groups or solo, as depicted in an exquisite shell inlay in which a woman holds a flute to her mouth, and delicate ribbons are wound around her curly hair. In addition to mortal women, these cylinder seals show the changing nature of the two major female deities, Inanna and Ishtar, whose different profiles Enheduanna helped reconcile into one interchangeable goddess. Before Sargon's conquest of Sumer, Inanna represented the divine female principle, who was the nurturing mother and the queen of heaven, overseeing and preserving the cycle of life. Her face generally was not shown, but her presence was symbolized by rings of bundled reeds. But change was underway, and by 2400 BCE, a vessel fragment shows a female deity visualized in human form, wearing a horned crown with leafy, vegetable-like material protruding from her shoulders and holding a cluster of dates. She has the aspects of fertility and fecundity associated with Inanna, but the animal-like crown also suggests ferocity. With the reign of Sargon and through Enheduanna's hymns, an ever more warlike female deity begins to be depicted. Ishtar, seen portrayed in the exhibition with weapons coming out of her shoulders, and her foot atop a lion whose leash she wields. In her poems, Enheduanna similarly portrays Inanna, or Ishtar, as a powerful goddess of combat and conquest, as well as of love and abundance. The text pits an embattled, enraged Inanna against her enemy, a mountain range that refuses to bow down or cede to her. We see the goddess, armed with knife and axes, cause the mountain stones to cascade downward and kill the mountain's male god. We'll hear more about him later. She sharpened both edges of her dagger, the poem says. She took Ebich's neck, as if tearing up grass, she presented the blade into its heart. She yelled like thunder, so that the stones making up Ebich crashed down its back. She then celebrates her conquest by triumphantly placing her foot atop the fallen stones. This is, scholars have noted, the first time you ever have illustrations for a text, which is another way to say that Enheduanna not only wrote, but continues to endure in many realms as a significant figure in ancient Sumer, in the history of women, and not least in literature as well. She lived, composed, and taught roughly 2,000 years before Aristotle and 1,700 years prior to Sappho. She tells her own story of banishment and her ultimate restoration by Inanna in a hymn that became part of the cultural myths of Sumeria, and for the next thousands of years it existed as a component of the wisdom tradition of that civilization and the cultures that followed. But she also steps forward and speaks in the first person of her own composing process. She reflects on how she's composed the hymn. At midnight, she says, she has heaped the coals in the censer and given birth to her creation. Her composing process is collaborative with the goddess. She and Inanna become one for a while, and from that deep collaboration, she gives birth to the hymn. This collaborative process with the goddess foreshadows the relationship of the various authors of the Old Testament with Jehovah by 1,000 years. She also, however, tells of prophecies, and they are not good, at least for the nearest future back then. Her long-forgotten poem, The Exaltation of Inanna, only translated in 1968, foreshadows her own history and the history of women in religion, literacy, and Western civilization for the next 4,800 years. And it's not happy. These two lines in particular. They approach the light of day about me, but the light is obscured, and the shadows approach the day, but the day is covered with a sandstorm. It would be many, many, many thousands of years before women rose up and began to reclaim her. It wasn't just the revolt staged by a rebel which exiled her and gave her the grist for her exhortatory poetry. We'll hear that in a moment, but for now, let's try to dig out of the sandstorm. We have to take our first break here, but we will be back in just a moment with some of the words of Enheduanna herself. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
It should be said that although Enheduanna lived 4,300 years ago, her existence as a historical personage is well established. She is not a myth, nor a mythic figure. There's a disc that has been restored, evacuated from Ur, that's U-R, with her image, and written historical records indicate that she was the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, the first ruler to unite northern and southern Mesopotamia, and that her mother was a Sumerian from southern Mesopotamia, perhaps a priestess. Sargon, her father, was also purported to be the son of a priestess, and, as an aside, but an interesting one, he is said to have recorded the following inscription on a cuneiform tablet, saying that his priestly mother conceived him, secretly brought him to birth, set him in an ark of bulrushes, made fast the door to it with pitch, and consigned him to the river, which did not overwhelm him, and instead brought him to Aki, the farmer, who brought him up to be his son. And then he said, "During my gardening, the goddess Ishtar loved me, and for 54 years the kingship was mine." So, there you have a precursor of of the Moses myth. Everything comes from something. But back to Enheduanna. She's best known for her works Inin Sagura, Nin Mesara, and Inin Mehusa, which translate as the Great-Hearted Mistress, a work of tremendously lush imagery and open-heartedness, and the exaltation of Inanna and the goddess of the fearsome powers. All three very powerful hymns to the goddess Inanna, who later was identified with other goddesses, such as the Akkadian or Syrian Ishtar, the Hittite Sauska, the Greek Aphrodite, and the Phoenician Astarte, among many others. It's one mother goddess. These hymns redefined, as I mentioned earlier, the gods for the people of the Akkadian Empire under Sargon's rule, and they helped provide the underlying religious homogeneity sought by the king. So for 40 years, Enheduanna held the office of high priestess, even surviving the attempted coup against her authority by a rebel named Lugal Ane. Enheduanna's composition, the Ninri Sara, the exaltation of Inanna, details her expulsion from Ur, which is located in southern Iraq, along with her prayerful request to the goddess for reinstatement. She composed, as well, 42 liturgical hymns addressed to temples across Sumer and Akkad. She was also busy. She was the first editor of a poetry anthology, a hymnal, or a songbook. She was the first poet to write in the first person. Her Sumerian temple hymns was the first collection of its kind. And, there are so many firsts that accrue to this remarkable woman. It makes you a little breathless. In the exaltation of Inanna, Enheduanna depicts Inanna as disciplining mankind as a goddess of battle, and she does mean mankind there. She thereby unites the warlike Akkadian Ishtar's qualities to those of the gentler Sumerian goddess of love and fecundity. She likens Inanna to a great storm bird who swoops down on the lesser gods and sends them fluttering off like surprised bats. In probably the most interesting part of the whole hymn, Enheduanna herself steps forward in the first person to recite her own past glories, establish her credibility, and explain her present plight, being banished as a high priestess from the temple in the city of Ur and from Uruk, and exiled to the steppes. She begs the moon god Nanna to intercede for her because the city of Uruk, under the ruler Lugalan, has rebelled against Sargon, and the rebel, Lugalan, has even destroyed the temple, one of the greatest temples in the ancient world. Further, he has dared to equate himself as an equal to the new high priestess, and in literally the most ancient recorded instance of sexual harassment, he made sexual advances to the high priestess, his own sister-in-law. So, we have to keep in mind that Enheduanna organized and presided over the temple's complex, the heart of the city, and that she held her own against an attempted coup by Lugalan, who forced her into exile. This is her address to him. Lament to the spirit of war. You hack down everything you see, war god. Rising on fearsome wings, you rush to destroy our land, raging like thunderstorms, howling like hurricanes, screaming like tempests, thundering, raging, ranting, drumming, whiplashing whirlwinds. Men falter at your approaching footsteps. Tortured dirges scream on your lyre of despair. Like a fiery salamander, you poison the land, growling over the earth like thunder, vegetation collapsing before you, blood gushing down mountainsides. Spirit of hatred, greed, and vengeance, your ferocious fire consumes our land. She also appeals, of course, to Inanna, I have laid out your daisies, set fire to the coals, conducted the rites, prepared your nuptial chamber. Now may your heart embrace me. These are my innovations, O mighty queen, that I made for you. What I composed for you by the dark of night, the cantor will chant by day. And then, it seems, Inanna heard her. She wrote, Now Inanna's heart has been restored, and the day became favorable to her. Clothed in beauty, radiant with joy, she carried herself like the elegant moonlight. O Inanna, praise. So Inanna stepped up, it would appear, and apparently heard her prayer, and Enheduanna was finally restored to her rightful place in the temple. She seems to have been the first woman to hold this position in Ur, and her comportment as high priestess would have served as an exemplary model for those who followed her. The skill and beauty of these works aside, their impact on Mesopotamian theology was profound, as it was on politics. She drew the gods closer to the people of the land. She synthesized Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs to create a much richer understanding than either one had had before. Her reflections on the moon god Nanna, for example, made him a deeper and more sympathetic character, and she elevated Inanna from a local vegetative deity to the all-powerful Queen of Heaven, modeling everything thereafter straight on up through Mary, mother of supposedly the Christ. So these two deities of Enheduanna's, Nanna, the moon god, and Inanna, and the others as well that she transformed to her work, also appeared more compassionate than they had before. They were gods for all of the people, and not just for Sumerians or Akkadians. Also, part of the allure of Enheduanna's work is her open sensuality and her ardent devotion, which makes us yearn more to hear about her own private lives. But in The Great-Hearted Mistress, also sometimes translated simply as a hymn to Inanna, she writes, You are magnificent. Your name is praised. You alone are magnified, my lady. I am yours. This will always be so. May you hear and be soothed toward me. Your divinity is resplendent in the land. My body has experienced it. We have to take one more break, and then I'll return with some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Poetry. Poetry is a fighting word. Now, I cogitated quite a bit over how to close this episode, and I thought of doing something lighthearted and merry, like, for example, Lady Mondegreens. Do you know what Lady Mondegreens are? Some people do and some don't. Well, Lady Mondegreens are mishearings of lyrics. For example, the Tudor song, Tudor period, in which you're moaning over the death of a knight, and they took him and they laid him on the green. And there was a famous story of a child listening to that and thinking, oh, how sad for Lady Mondegreen. And there are many mishearings of that sort, and I was going to share a few of them, but maybe I will just a few before I go on to more serious stuff. For example, there's a number of them about 12 Days of Christmas. On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pantry. Or my true love gave to me the Partridge Family. Or a partridge in a parakeet. There seem to be quite a few of that sort. This one I do love. Misheard lyrics, the 8 maids a milking. Well, 8 made an inkling, somebody heard. And they also heard a partridge and a cashier. And they also heard a cartridge in a bare tree. So, there's lots of Lady Mondegreens. You can find some for yourself. But now on to more serious stuff, although there's a smile or two buried in them. Because we started with literally the mother of us all, Enheduanna, I thought we would just touch down through the centuries on some people who were firsts in their time, who may be forgotten or not. I don't know. But they are all poets, and they are all women. And I'm starting just today, for what the hell, with Mary Elizabeth Coleridge. Most people know Coleridge because they've heard of Coleridge, of course, but they don't know about her. Her dates are 1861 to 1907. She, of course, grew up in a literary household from which she never lived very far away. Her father entertained Browning and Tennyson and all the boys. She was committed to helping working women, and she lectured at the Working Women's College and taught in their homes. She did publish in her lifetime essays in periodicals and several successful novels, but Coleridge himself never allowed her verse to be published, not under her own name, only anonymously or under a Greek pseudonym that meant the Wanderer. It's maddening. Her collected poems appeared posthumously. And here's one of them, by Mary Elizabeth Coleridge. The Other Side of a Mirror. I sat before my glass one day and conjured up a vision bare, unlike the aspects glad and gay that erst were found reflected there, the vision of a woman wild with more than womanly despair. Her hair stood back on either side, a face bereft of loveliness. It had no envy now to hide, what once no man on earth could guess. It formed the thorny aureole of hard, unsanctified distress. Her lips were open, not a sound came through the parted lines of red. Whate'er it was, the hideous wound in silence and in secret bled. No sigh relieved her speechless woe. She had no voice to speak her dread, and in her lurid eyes there shone the dying flame of life's desire, made mad because its hope was gone, and kindled at the leaping fire of jealousy and fierce revenge, and strength that could not change nor tire. Shade of a shadow in the glass, oh, set the crystal surface free. Pass, as the fairer visions pass, nor evermore return to be the ghost of a distracted hour that heard me whisper, I am she. Well, it certainly gives you a changed attitude toward Coleridge. Now, a definite first, an original mother, was Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks, excuse me, Gwendolyn Brooks was, her date, she was born in 1917 in Kansas. She was raised in Chicago, and she was really the first contemporary Black American poet. Certainly there were others, but she set a certain standard that every poet, Black or white, male or female, has had to live up to. And this is one of her poems. Her volumes include A Street in Brownsville, The Bean Eaters, Family Portrait, and an autobiography. This poem is called Jessie Mitchell's Mother. Into her mother's bedroom to wash the ballooning body. My mother is jelly-hearted, and she has a brain of jelly, sweet quiver, soft, irrelevant, not essential. Only a habit would cry if she died. A pleasant sort of fool without the least iron. Are you better, mother? Do you think it will come today? The stretched yellow rag that was Jessie Mitchell's mother reviewed her. Young, and so thin, and so straight, as if nothing could ever bend her. But poor men would bend her, and doing things with poor men, being much in bed, and babies would bend her over, and the rest of things in life that were for poor women, coming to them grinning and pretty with intent to bend and to kill. Comparisons shattered her heart, ate at her bulwarks, the shabby and the bright. She, almost hating her daughter, crept into an old sly refuge. Jessie's black, and her way will be black, and jerkier even than mine. Mine, in fact, because I was lovely. Had flowers tucked in the jerks. Flowers were here and there. She revived for the moment, settled and dried up triumphs, forced perfume into old petals, pulled up the droop, refueled, triumphant, long exhaled breaths. Her exquisite yellow youth. Okay. Now we need to dip back a bit in time for somebody who's very, very well known, but not for her feminism, which is a pity. Elizabeth Barrett Browning has always been thought, sonnets from the Portuguese and her love poems to Robert, and that's where we leave her. But we forget that she wrote a book-length novel, Aurora Leigh, which, by the way, Susan B. Anthony carried with her in her little carpet bag as she traveled all across the United States trying to get women to register to vote. So, I would say that's a pretty feminist creation for Elizabeth Barrett Browning to have come out with. And this poem is a sort of sleuth under the radar poem about her feminism. Remember that she was kept invalided by a tyrannical father, and she lived alone with him in a house, and was sick most of the time, but wrote a lot of poems. And Browning came to see her, and she and he got it on, and they ran away together to Italy, at which point she became very non-neurasthenic, very active, had a child, lived quite a while, lived in a wonderful villa. I mean, they just lived, and they had lots of lovemaking, and they were very happy, she and Browning. So, this presages that, because this was pre-Robert, pre her father having, heart attack, and pre her liberation. It's meant rather ironically. A Man's Requirements by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Love me, sweet, with all thou art, feeling, thinking, seeing. Love me in the lightest part. Love me in full being. Love me with thine open youth in its frank surrender, with the vowing of thy mouth, with its silence tender. Love me with thine azure eyes, made for earnest granting. Taking colour from the skies, can heaven's truth be wanting? Love me with their lids, that fall snow-like at first meeting. Love me with thine heart, that all neighbours then see beating. Love me with thine hand stretched out, freely, open-minded. Love me with thy loitering foot, hearing one behind it. Love me with thy voice that turns sudden faint above me. Love me with thy blush that burns when I murmur. Love me with thy thinking soul. Break it to love sighing. Love me with thy thoughts that roll on through living, dying. Love me when in thy gorgeous airs, when the world has crowned thee. Love me kneeling at thy prayers with the angels round thee. Love me pure, as musers do, up the woodlands shady. Love me gaily, fast and true, as a winsome lady. Through all hopes that keep us brave, farther off or nigher. Love me for the house and grave, and for something higher. Thus, if thou wilt prove me, dear, woman's love no fable, I will love thee half a year, as a man is able. Zing, that's a real zinger. And this is another sort of quintessential American woman poet, Edna St. Vincent Millay. One of her lesser-known poems, but a beaut. Edna St. Vincent Millay's The Ballad of the Harp Weaver. "Son," said my mother when I was knee-high, "you've need of clothes to cover you, and not a rag have I. There's nothing in the house to make a boy breeches, no shears to cut a cloth with, nor thread to take stitches. There's nothing in the house but a loaf end of rye and a harp with a woman's head nobody will buy." And she began to cry. That was in the early fall. When came the late fall, "Son," she said, "the sight of you makes your mother's blood crawl, little skinny shoulder blades sticking through your clothes. And where you'll get a jacket from, God above knows. It's lucky for me, lad, your daddy's in the ground and can't see the way. I let his son go around." And she made a queer sound. That was in the late fall. When the winter came, I'd not a pair of breeches nor a shirt to my name. I couldn't go to school or out of doors to play, and all the other little boys passed our way. "Son," said my mother, "come, climb into my lap, and I'll chafe your little bones while you take a nap." And oh, but we were silly, for half an hour or more, me with my long legs dragging on the floor, a rocking to a Mother Goose rhyme. Oh, but we were happy for half an hour's time. But there was I, a great boy, and what would folks say to hear my mother singing me to sleep all day in such a daft way? Men say the winter was bad that year. Fuel was scarce, and food was dear. A wind with a wolf's head howled about our door, and we burned up the chairs, and we sat on the floor. All that was left us was a chair we couldn't break, and the harp with a woman's head nobody would take, for song or pity's sake. The night before Christmas I cried with the cold. I cried myself to sleep like a 2-year-old. And in the deep night I felt my mother rise and stare down upon me with love in her eyes. I saw my mother sitting on the one good chair, a light falling on her from I couldn't tell where, looking 19 and not a day older, and the harp with a woman's head leaned against her shoulder, her thin fingers moving in the thin, tall strings, were weaving wonderful things. Many bright threads from where I couldn't see were running through the harp strings rapidly, and gold threads whistling through my mother's hand. I saw the web grow and the pattern expand. She wove a child's jacket, and when it was done she laid it on the floor and wove another one. She wove a red cloak so regal to see, she'd made it for a king's son, I said, and not for me. But I knew it was for me. She wove a pair of breeches quicker than that. She wove a pair of boots and a little cocked hat. She wove a pair of mittens. She wove a little blouse. She wove all night in the still, cold house. She sang as she worked, and the harp strings spoke. Her voice never faltered, and the thread never broke. And when I awoke, there sat my mother, with the harp against her shoulder, looking 19 and not a day older, a smile about her lips and a light about her head, and her hands in the harp strings, frozen dead. And piled up beside her, and toppling to the skies, were the clothes of a king's son, just my size. And this last little one, to bring a smile to your face for the holidays, and we'll see you in January. This is by Muriel Rukeyser, and it's a famous poem, short, called The Myth. And it gives the answer to the erasure of Enheduanna. Long afterwards, Oedipus, old and blinded, walked the roads. He smelled a familiar smell. It was the Sphinx. Oedipus said, "I want to ask one question. Why didn't I recognize my mother?" "You gave the wrong answer," said the Sphinx. "But that was what made everything possible," said Oedipus. "No," she said. "When I asked what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening, you answered man. You didn't say anything about women." "When you say man," said Oedipus, "you include women, too. Everyone knows that." She said, "That's what you think." Those are my fighting words. Add yours on For the Moment Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. See you in January. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.